Hey guys, I'm back with another podcast episode for you. Today we talk to Caleb Hoover, who I've been a longtime fan of, a Lumix fanboy and just loving Lumix cameras. The fact that I got to meet him at one of these Lumix events was really cool and special for myself, being a huge fan of his channel. Now, it was so fun having this conversation, chatting with him, talking about the future of Lumix, what he wants to see going forward, and what his plans are in the future. Anyways, let's dive right into this conversation with Caleb. So to my personal audience who doesn't know who Caleb Hoover is, thank you so much, Caleb, for joining me today. Yeah. Hey,
Absolutely.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. This is really cool. I hope hope we can build each other's audiences here. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I've been like a longtime fan of Caleb, and if you don't know who Caleb Hoover is, this guy is like one of the OG Lumix legends.
Oh my gosh.
From the wild west of the GH5 days.
You're making me blush.
That's the goal. So, Caleb, can you give my audience just a little bit of a context on who you are, how you got started in Lumix, and just kind of tell us your background a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been doing freelance video production where I'm at in South Dakota. I've been doing it since 2012. And you know what? I kind of started on that Canon T3i. I don't know if you've ever used that, but it was kind of like the entry level camera for people getting into like weddings and things like that. And so I was working for this nonprofit and they got rid of my position. I was doing some like video and some photography for them. They got rid of my position. And so my wife and I were talking, we're like, what should we do now? Because I'm basically out of a job. So we decided to go into this on my own, on our own. And so I invested in a Canon T3i, which, you know, might not be the best camera to like start off on, but at the time it was perfect. And so I just kind of started, you know, getting my name out there and try to get into some weddings, knowing that I did not want to spend all my time in weddings. Like I knew I wanted to get out there pretty quick, but it was like a good like starting point. So if you're looking to get into video and kind of like learn how stories are put together and things like that, weddings are a good starting point for that.
I feel like weddings is that rite of passage for all videographers and photographers.
Oh, yeah.
Like you do a few and then you're done.
And you like have to learn how to work with people, you know what I mean? And bridezillas and things like that. But I knew I didn't want to stay in weddings, and I wanted to get more into like the corporate realm of video, specifically like video for websites, because, you know, around that time, you know, people were really starting to put video on websites. It was becoming less TV commercial, more online video. And so that's kind of the direction that I wanted to go. And so since then, you know, I've done everything from, you know, music videos to political commercials, which I will never touch again. But my bread and butter kind of was in like the manufacturing and banking industry. Up to 2014, I think that's when the GH4 came out. And I was like, I saw a lot of people using this GH4, and so I invested in the GH4, and I absolutely loved it. But then the GH5 came out, and that was absolutely game changing as far as hybrid camera systems go. The internal image stabilization, some of the shoot settings like 4K 60 was, I believe, on there, and it's been a little while since I've used a GH5, but some of those shoot settings were just incredible. But the main thing was that image stabilization, because you could just like go handheld real fast, not have to worry about setting up on a gimbal or anything like that, get some really steady, great looking shots. The other thing, though, was just the ability. I loved just adapting lenses to that system as well, like the Sigma 18-35 with the Metabone speed booster. The quality of image that you got with the GH5 was just so, it was, I mean, incredible compared to, you know, the GH4 even. And so I was just loving that setup. And, you know, in the pandemic hit, 2020, I just started uploading some settings videos about the GH5 to a YouTube channel that actually started in 2011, and I wish I would have like started making videos back in 2011. in 2012. Yeah. So I just started uploading some, my thumbs shuffling through settings, and kind of I just contribute to a community. I mean, that's what YouTube's all about, is just contributing to a community, and that's kind of where I found a community, and I guess people started watching those videos as well. So
Right. I know it's a big added advantage. I know myself personally, when I got the GH7 and then, eventually the G9.
wait, you have a GH7?
No, G7. Chill.
Oh,
Chill.
you said
Chill.
GH7. I was like, what are
Did
you
I?
not telling us?
Oh, well.
I was getting so angry. How do I not
Sorry.
have a GH7?
No, so when I had the G7, I remember watching your videos and like copying all your settings back in the day.
Right on.
I think literally to this day, all my natural settings are your natural settings.
Oh, yeah.
Like for the natural color profile. So you
Absolutely.
bought that GH5 and then you started making some videos about the GH5 and the settings
Yeah.
on the camera. What made you continue to want to pursue making so much Lumix content ever since? I feel like you're not titled this yet in the Lumix community, but I think you should deserve the title of like the Lumix dad
Oh,
or
no,
something
yeah,
like
well,
that.
I don't know. I think I don't know. I'm not that old, am I? Oh yeah, I might be actually. I
You
might
could
be
probably be my father, Caleb.
Yeah, I mean, what was your question? I totally lost my train of thought now that you started talking about how old I am and my gray beard.
I'm sorry. I
I
didn't
put
mean
those
to
words in
offend
your
you.
mouth.
Okay. No, I was saying, what made you continuing to be a part of the Lumix community, make content for Lumix creators? What was your passion? Because not a lot of people were doing that at the time, and now there's a good handful of us creators that are focusing specifically on creating Lumix content and building the Lumix brand and community as well. But what was kind of your drive back then?
Yeah, I mean, that's what it was, is just community. Like, I am a huge proponent of community, anything like contributing, bringing value to a community. That's what I'm trying to do now with my business, is helping business owners and individuals who like want to have an online video presence, like even just making videos with their phones. So like everything that I try to do is driven by the fact that I love community. I've been involved in a church community for a long time. I was the worship pastor at our church for however long, and have been involved in ministry like 18 plus years. And so just the whole community presence is huge in my life. And so that was it. Like just being able to provide value. And if like some of those natural color profile settings help somebody maybe even make money with their cameras, like to me, that's what it was all about.
Right, for sure. I feel like now I remember when I was first making a lot of Lumix content back in that day, I was like, all right, I don't want to be a Lumix filmmaker, like known as the Lumix guy. But as I progressively just kind of leaned more and more into it, I think there's this appreciation for not only myself, but like I realized the appreciation as the community, like they need content creators that are focusing and filmmakers that are using their cameras and can show what that's like for their community, because there's people for Canon, there's people for Sony, but there's not a ton of people for Lumix, and it's this special community that I see that will be just massively growing with what Lumix is going to be coming out in the future. Talking about stuff that was coming out, so you were coming out with you were a GH5 user.
Yep.
Waiting for that GH6. Did you have the GH5S and Mark II as well?
I used the GH5 Mark II. I did not really I used the S as well, but I did not have those ones like on my camera shelf basically.
Gotcha.
I pretty much stuck to just the GH5, and some of the work that I was doing, that's what I needed in those cases.
So then what was that transition like for yourself going into, and what was your first impressions of when that GH6 was announced and launched? Was that like, yes, this is it for you, or you're like, dang.
Well, okay,
bummer?
so there was, I think, like so much build up amongst the Lumix community for the GH6, right? So it was like however many years since like an update for the GH5. I mean, yes, there was the S, there was the GH5 II, which the GH5 II is a fantastic camera. And the GH5 still, even in 2024, at the time of shooting this, is still a fantastic camera. Don't get me wrong. But there was like so much buildup for this GH6. And I think like my initial impressions when the GH6 came out was, yes, I was excited, but I was also just a little disappointed in some ways because I think they had such an opportunity. Lumix had such an opportunity with the GH6 to incorporate like a new autofocus system. And yes, they did improve that contrast-based autofocus system on the GH6, but it just wasn't there, right? And so I think like Sony and Canon, they were like really hitting like the content creator market really hard with some of their cameras that were coming out. I feel like Lumix really missed the boat on targeting like content creators with the GH6. With that being said, the GH6 is a fantastic camera. Like
Right.
absolutely, like we'll use the term beast of a camera, right? The shoot settings that you have on the GH6, the bit rates that you have, like you can do pretty much all of your professional work with that camera. However, they really missed the boat by not putting a new like phase detect autofocus system in that camera to target like the next level of content creator, right? The content creator that wanted to really just make like cinematic videos. I feel like that was the miss in there because, I mean, you talk to anybody nowadays, they all want to be YouTubers, right? And I feel like that was the miss on that camera. And so I was kind of disappointed because I wanted just like a content camera as well. Like I could rely on and know that I could set it up. I'm going to get a buttery image and I'm going to be in focus the whole time I'm talking. I don't have to worry about like a LiDAR system or a electronic follow focus system or anything like that to make sure I'm in focus. And I think that's where I was a little bit disappointed. I was on a live stream with it was Film Voyager during that during that announcement, and we were all just kind of like, what? They didn't put a new autofocus system in there? And I understand that the autofocus is not everything when it comes to that, but it was such a missed opportunity with the GH6.
And I feel like I think you even said this on one of your own videos, but I wonder if that's partially like kind of the community's fault too, a little bit, because like
Yeah,
we pushed so hard. Yeah, we pushed so hard on wanting, the GH6 to be released and like we give it to us now, give it to us now, give it to us now.
Mm-hmm.
And then the G9 Mark II just got announced, and came out in November of 2023. And then that's basically the GH6 in a nutshell without, the flippy screen, the front record button, a couple more of those professional features like tally lights and stuff. But that was the camera that like the GH6 really should have been.
Yeah.
What was your first impressions on that camera? When that camera came out, were you like, this is it?
Yeah, on the G9 II, I pulled it out of the box and I knew immediately like what I wanted to use this camera for. And so it's like the S5 II body style, right? So it's not bulky like the GH6, which I actually kind of like the GH6 body style for some professional shoots. But the G9 II was just like, I pulled it out and like, you have the small micro four thirds lenses, like the 12 to 35, which is going to be your everyday 24 to 70 millimeter. I was just like, this is like an everyday use camera. This is like a content camera, right? So I can carry this camera with me every single day. I've made some videos about that. And yes, I'm glad to know that you watch my videos and you know that I said that the G9 II is what the GH6 should have been. Thanks.
See,
Matthew
of
Dangyou,
course.
for watching
hey,
this.
Man.
Yeah. But that, like, I knew immediately what this camera was going to be in my workflow. As far as like, I would not use it the same way I use the GH6. Let's put it that way. So
Okay.
the G9 II, I would not use the same way I use the GH6. So the GH6, I'm going to use some of those. I'm going to use for like B-roll type content on some like professional shoots and things like that. But the G9 II, I'm just going to use that as like an everyday carry camera. Like it's going to be in my camera bag. It's going to go with me to the coffee shop. It's going to go with me home. It's going to go with me on a hike. It's so easy to carry around, and you know that it's going to be reliable. The autofocus is amazing on the G9 II. It is so good on the G9 II, and I don't know if that's because of the micro four thirds sensor on there or anything like that, but that should have been in the GH6. And like you said, maybe it's our fault, right? Maybe it's our fault that we pushed so hard for a GH6, because I know, like, I was ready, right? I was ready for that GH6. I was ready for not a GH5 Mark II. I was ready for the next thing in the GH series. But the GH6, it just wasn't quite there. The G9 II kind of takes that next step with that autofocus, especially, is so good. And so I think what that shows too is, like, I think Lumix is committed to that micro four thirds system. I mean, why would you create a whole new autofocus system and engine for a micro four thirds system if you're not going to keep making micro four thirds cameras? So something to keep in mind.
That's a good point. I've slowly, since I have the G9 Mark II, the S5 IIX, I've been reaching less and less for the GH6, mostly again because of that autofocus system. I do love the color, but the viewing when you input LUTs on the GH6, I personally noticed that the LUTs don't look accurate in comparison to the G9 Mark II or the S5 IIX. It's more of that softer. I don't know if you had that experience too, but
yeah, a little bit for sure. I mean, it is softer. The tones are a little bit different on it, right? I feel like. I mean, the image-wise, I love the image coming out of the GH6, but the G9 II does match up a little bit better with, like, the S5 II and S5 IIX. I was going to say Mark X, but that's not it. S5 IIX. But I know, like, to go along with that, what you were saying, that you're picking it up less, I know, like, Emily from Micro Four Nerds, like, she straight up sold her GH6. I don't even think she has one anymore. So, yeah. I mean, that's the impact that the G9 II has had on some people. Like, the G9 II is where it's at.
Right. I know for myself, once they released that, like, full frame version of, like, the S2H, basically, GH6 specs in a full frame system with that flippy up screen, my GH6 is leaving my kit the moment that happens.
Interesting, yeah.
That is the flippy up screen, the front record button, the tally lights are such a thing I miss so much. And since I primarily shoot on the S5 IIX now, even like what I'm doing right now, I know that's typically your A cam for YouTube now, isn't it?
Yeah, the S5 IIX. Yep. I mean, I use the S5 II quite a bit here in studio. I'm actually using the S5 IIX right now, but I use it quite a bit in studio, and I'm using the X a lot on client work and things like that. But yes, I mean, I know exactly what you mean.
Right. And I feel like, well, S5 II, S5 IIX are very, those very similar cameras. Obviously, a bunch more features in the X version versus the normal version. But what was those impressions of that new full frame lineup? I know you went to Japan. You got that privileged trip of going. I'm really hoping they do that in 2 years, hopefully, or something like that. And then we can hang out again in Japan. That would be super fun. But what was those impressions when they announced, phase detect autofocus? The S5 II, S5 IIX was kind of labeled as the best hybrid camera by tons of different YouTubers and filmmakers who are not even Lumix creators or not Lumix shooters, as the best hybrid camera in 2023. What was your impressions on that?
Yeah, I mean, I was blown away that they went that. Well, first of all, I was blown away just being in Tokyo.
Right.
Like, I was trying to wrap my mind around that a little bit. But the fact that they went with this, hybrid phase detect autofocus system, like, the whole room cheered, right? So it's like people that have had experience with Lumix cameras kind of, and when I say this, I'm speaking from a content creator perspective, okay? So, the room cheered because they know the importance they know from past Lumix cameras that the shoot settings are always going to be so good. The image is always going to be so good. The one thing that was missing from a content creator perspective was that autofocus, and now with the S5 II, they have that autofocus system, right? And And I mean, right out of the bat, like I think Lumix nailed it with that autofocus system. There's maybe a few different tweaks, and maybe some other settings, like if you have to go down into full HD, like 120, I think you kind of lose. I think it goes more back to that contrast based. So there's like a few tweaks in there that might be beneficial to improve on in the future. But as far as like pulling the S5 II out of the box in Tokyo to going outside of the conference center that we were in, I mean, it was like instant, like, oh, this is amazing.
Yeah. Wow. And what was that transition like? Not only going from a Micro Four Third camera system going to the full frame system, what was that like? But then also, what was that like for, your channel? Your channel was so known as the
Yeah.
Micro Four Third, GH5, GH6.
Yep.
You're all Micro Four Third to now you're full frame. How did your audience respond to that, and what was that transition like for yourself?
Yeah, so that's kind of an interesting topic because my channel is so reliant on GH5 information, which is totally fine. I'll still put, like today, I'll still put polls out on my community board. There's on YouTube that has like the community posts and things like that. And, I'll say like, what's your go-to camera right now? And still the GH5 still has like the most amount of votes, right? And I think there are some people that might have felt like a little abandoned a little bit, but I think like a lot of these principles kind of carry over to some of these other cameras too. And it's like, as maybe if you're a hobby video shooter, or if you are trying to get into like some client work type things, I think a lot of what I talk about on my channel can carry over to, like, let's say you start making some money with your GH5. Well, you save up and you're able to purchase an S5 IIX and a full frame lens or something like that. So I think it's kind of like, it's almost like the progression in my own channel is like, I think what a lot of people can experience is now here is the flow of like camera systems and content. And I mean, I try to every once in a while bring the GH5 into my content. I like a few months ago, at the time of recording this, like I put out a video that's like some GH5 features that are still, like, they were so good, these GH5 features, that they are in the S5 IIX. So features from a camera that came out in 2017 are on a camera, because they were so good on the GH5, those same features are on the S5 IIX that came out in 2023.
Right.
So like the GH5 will always stand the test of time. And I still promote it. I mean, even right now, like I said earlier in this, right now, if you are looking for a camera system, like just starting, the GH5 is still an amazing camera in 2024 to purchase, either on the used market, or I don't even know if you can get it brand new anymore. But if you're looking to purchase a camera, the GH5 is still a great camera to get, even today. So I think, and I've heard from you, and I've heard from other people that like, I kind of felt a little abandoned once that full frame, lineup came out. So how about from your perspective as somebody who watched my channel? What was that like?
Right. Yeah, no, for sure. I think it was that a sense of sort of, I think as more of a viewer, it was that a little bit of abandonment, but like,
Yeah.
as you progressively made more and more content, it's not like you made, all right, now I'm only full frame. It was that diversification of, Micro Four Third and full frame. And then it just like, I saw more of your channel as that overarching, like, I'm a Lumix channel. And that's like, I just make content about Lumix content. So that, I think from a viewer perspective, was like how I analyzed that. And I know for myself, like I was so heavily on the G9, so heavily on the GH6, so heavily on the S5 IIX, and now the G9 Mark II. And now now I'm making content about the GH6 still. I'm making content about the S5 IIX, making content about the G9 Mark II. And then it's kind of nice to kind of have that flow of like, here's these cameras, here's these cameras, here's these cameras. But because Lumix systems work so seamlessly all together. You know, their menu systems are basically identical,
So good.
which, you know, the switching back and forth is so amazing. And I know for
Yeah.
myself, one big gripe, and I want to hear a couple gripes about you for Lumix cameras.
Yep.
One of my big gripes is going to be, you know, I can't copy my menu system from an S5 2X to a G9 Mark II. I know there's
Yeah.
different settings, but like at the core of it, so many of those settings are the exact same.
Right. Yeah. Why can't we just carry them over?
Exactly. What are your 3 gripes of Lumix cameras?
Ooh, 3 gripes. Okay. The first gripe. I know that, and we might get into this in just a little bit too, but my first gripe I would say is I know there's some box cameras, but I would like to see a mid-range cinema line. And like I said, we'll probably talk about this a little bit, but I want to see like a mid-range cinema line that's not a hybrid system like the S5 2X or the GH6. The other gripe is on the full frame, I wish that the 4K 60 was a full frame. I wish it didn't crop into APS-C. That's kind of a
Yep.
gripe. It's not a huge deal.
Right.
But it is a little bit of a gripe. And the other one would be, oh, this is a good question. I don't know if I can come up with 3. The third one, I would say lack of 4K 120 on the full frame sensors, I would say. I'd
Yeah.
probably go there.
Yeah. I feel like there's so many great things that, you know, about Lumix cameras itself, but there's definitely those like the tiny nitty-gritties. I don't know if you personally, I don't do this, but it is an issue if you externally record raw is with the S5 2X. Have you seen this issue where there's an HDMI lag when you have sound turn on recording externally?
Yeah. Yep.
And
I've been talking to a
that's
couple people about that. Yep.
that's like I'm like, dang, like if I wanted to shoot raw, I would only feel comfortable shooting raw for interviews with that delay, nothing
Right.
else, because I need to record sound. Yeah, I guess you can cut sound, you know, when you're recording B-roll, but then you just, you know, you're losing sound, which is kind of a bummer.
Yeah. Yeah, you kind of want that, ambient noise in there sometimes.
Right, exactly.
But yeah,
Well, cool.
that delay would be kind of annoying for sure.
Right. Well, yeah, like you said, we're gonna kind of move on and talk about what's Caleb's wants for the future. What's your dream camera for a full frame camera, and what's that dream camera for yourself for that Micro Four Third?
Ooh. I haven't thought about the Micro Four Thirds. That's a good question.
I have my dream camera set on, you know, that
Yep.
that full frame series, but
Yeah.
yeah, I was like, what do I want to see next with the Micro
Yeah.
Four Third camera?
I would just like for the Micro Four Thirds, I'll start there. If it's a GH7 or GH6 Mark II, just that phase detect autofocus in there, I would say like that's the next step for me really, and that way that satisfies a lot of like hybrid shooters and content creators who want that type of beast of a camera for their content that can rely on the autofocus. And the great thing about the Micro Four Thirds system is just how adaptable it is to a bunch of different lenses and things like that. And so just kind of some of the communication issues when it comes to autofocus and some of these different lenses too, maybe cleaning that up a little bit. But as far as a Micro Four Thirds system, I mean, that's probably where I'm at, just like a newer GH6 version or a GH7. But body style, keep it all. Yeah, I mean, for me, that's where I'm at. For the full frame system, like, so I just said, like a mid-range cinema line. Doesn't have to be an FX6 type camera. Probably an FX3 or FX30 type of camera that is a cinema line. So it has everything that you need from a cinema camera perspective. I know this is hard and you might not be able to do this, but those internal NDs, we always talk about those. Having internal NDs on there would be huge. I would love to see maybe a mic input or something like that, like a mini XLR input or something like that. But a cinema line that is affordable, like the Lumix cameras are, with the L mount system that that kind of gets away from that hybrid style body.
Right. Would you want IBIS in a box cinema camera?
I mean, yeah, I would. I would love to have it.
I know that's the mix between, there's like, I feel like there's half the side that's like, no, give me like, don't give me that. I just want pure raw. And then there's the other half that's like, wants the IBIS. And I know I suggested to the engineers, I'm like, dude, create a locking mechanism that locks the stabilizer physically, locks it. So it's like, if you want to put it on a car, that's a locked off stabilizer. You don't want that. You want your IBIS, unlocks it, and you have the IBIS. Again, I'm not an engineer, so.
That's a great idea. I love it.
That's someone else's headache. That's someone else's headache to figure out. I just shoot and make things look cool.
Yeah, I just complain. That's all I do. About the cameras.
That's fair too. What's the physical layout? Are you thinking more of that box style or more of that FX3 style?
Yeah, FX3 style. I really like that camera body of the FX3, where it's just enough to. Like you can rig it out really well. Sometimes the box style cameras are just a little, I mean, the FX3 is not much bigger, but sometimes the box style cameras are just a little too small, you know? If you get into some of the Z cams and things like that, there's a little, almost in my mind, just a little too small and a little too light. But I think, I mean, you can rig them up, obviously, but I really like the FX3 style, the body style of that camera. It's like, it feels good in your hands when I've used them, and I like the weight of them, and I like that it has the threads built into it already. So if you can cage it up, or you can, you can thread it right into that camera from just the body. Yeah, I like that style of camera. But
would you want the flippy uppy screen?
I mean, the GH6 screen, if you can get that, if we're building a dream camera, if we can get
this is the
like
dream camera,
like
a flippy up screen. I don't know if you've seen Josh Cameron's video on his dream camera, but I have those mixed opinions. I'm like,
I haven't seen that yet.
So he literally drew it out. Its entire thing was drawn out, and it was like put together. And I'm like, dang, that's actually would be a sick camera. And now it made me debate, would I prefer having a flippy up screen or have a camera where the screen kind of flips out of the camera? It's a little bit chunkier. And then there's a V mount built into it, so you can just pivot V mount straight to the camera. And I'm like, oh,
love it. Yeah,
I love V mounts.
That sounds like a great
personally, idea. I rarely shoot on the batteries themselves because I will drain and kill these batteries 30 minutes each battery.
Right.
I'm V mount every single day.
And honestly, taking something like the GH6 body and making it less hybrid, but kind of like that size. I have it up on a tripod over here. I keep looking at it because it's so beautiful. And like just having like that style body, less hybrid style and more like cinema style. Yeah, I think that'd be great, honestly, something like that.
What would also be cool, and I know we've talked about this before too at the Lumix Collective trip, see our videos,
Check them out.
There's I think what would be cool is if they created basically the GH6 camera, right? In a full frame body with open gate 60 frames a second. Come on, we need that as a content creator. But the catch is it will have the normal version and then the X version. The X version cuts that viewfinder, makes it into more of that cinema line, but they both still have the flippy up screens, the front record buttons. They still one's that black on black design, while the normal S1H is more that content creator specific. So it's like one's focused on that and then one's focused more on like professional filmmaker, but still, 4K 60 full frame, no crops whatsoever. I feel like that's the beauty. That's the next level.
Let's go.
And then after that, everything else, I feel like I'm very curious where the camera world's going to start going. Like
totally.
Specs, no one needs 4K 240 frames a second on a mirrorless camera.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either.
4K 120 is nice, but like I rarely use it, and when I need it, G9 Mark II or GH6 now, you know.
Yeah, there's some product stuff that I do that I'll use it on, but
Right. It's very specific, super specific, and it's not like you're going to need the overkill of like 240 frames a second in 4K.
agreed.
So
Agreed.
it's the interesting part where it's like, okay, what's the future of like the next thing cameras are going to come out with? Obviously, I feel like a lot more cameras are going to start, pulling from the Lumix, being open gate recording, because that is
Yeah.
huge for content
Yep.
creators. Both of
Yep.
us, I think, are filming in open gate right now, so we can both have that
Correct.
vertical and horizontal crop. But like you said, I feel like now it's just going to be kind of nitpicking and trying to make cameras
Oh yeah.
more fine tuned, which is the interesting part, because it's like, well, besides physical differences, internal NDs, maybe a locked off IBIS system, everything else would be firmware updates, like Sony cameras that don't have, well, Sony is a whole nother beast in itself, but being able to just like simply firmware update your camera to have shutter angle for like other camera brands, that seems like a no-brainer. I know Sony's just going to make a new camera body and be like, well, this is just a firmware update,
Yeah.
but it'll be a new camera body. And luckily, Lumix doesn't do that. Lumix hasn't been known to do that. So at least we're cool here.
And yeah, and here's the thing, like there is not a bad camera out there right now. Like if you whatever, I mean, honestly, whatever budget you're at, you can find like a fantastic camera to use, especially if you're just want to make YouTube videos or anything like that. There's not a bad camera. There are certain settings on different cameras that once you start getting into some other type of work and things like that, that you might want to consider, but there's no bad camera.
Right. And it's getting to this point. It's like once, Lumix does kind of catch up in specs, at least on the full frame terms with that 4K 120 and all of those good details, and hopefully 4K 60,
Yeah.
Open Gate
Open
60
Gate.
and Open Gate 48. That's a huge,
That'd be
I feel
nice.
like, must, because as a social media content creator, that's definitely something that's needed for B-roll. But, there's not much more after that. I feel like once you
Yeah.
hit that level, that's kind of the ceiling right now, where it's like, okay, so what's next? The next camera that most people would buy after something with all those specs is going to be a cinema camera. So maybe
Yeah.
the future for Lumix on like higher end cameras is going to be cinema cameras. Maybe it's going to be more focused on movie specific filmmaking cameras, while
Yeah.
they start producing a little bit lower budget quality cameras that not have all the bells and whistles, but are like updated budget intro level cameras, like the GH5, for example, but like an updated camera.
Here's where I think the future of cameras are going to go, and I think Lumix, with their technology and some of the advancements that they have in their tech, as far as like the backing with Panasonic and things like that, like I think some of it, not a lot of it, I think some of it's going to go more like AI generation inside these cameras. And so I think, as we kind of go into the mid 2020s here, is that where we're at? What is it, 2024? Yeah. I think like some AI technology is going to start coming into these cameras, and I don't know what that looks like, but I think that's probably the next phase with some of these systems. I don't know.
And it could also be I know there's very, very few cameras that do it, but filming 180 degrees, like fully immersive videos
Right.
for the Apple Pro Vision. So
Yeah. Yep.
who knows where the video
gonna
world is gonna go? We're all gonna just hop on the train and try and figure it out from here on
I'm
out.
just here for the
right
ride.
now. I know. I'm just here trying to make some Lumix camera content videos and chill on
You're doing a
YouTube.
great job. You're doing a great job. I love your channel.
Thank you, man. Well, thank you so much for Caleb just joining me on today's podcast episode, or, I don't even know what this is
Absolutely.
called yet, to be 100% honest, but we're figuring that out. It'll be figured out before this video gets
Love it.
posted. So,
Yep.
but yeah, thank you so much for joining me, man. I'm so
Absolutely.
stoked that we got to have this time and chat together. Anything that you want to say? You want to shout out your channel, let people know where you are?
Yeah, I mean, you can search Caleb Hoover. I'll probably be the one that pops up. It's like a black and white picture, and it has a bunch of Lumix content. What I want to do is help you master your Lumix cameras.
Awesome. Well, sweet. Thank you so much, Caleb.
All right. Thanks, man.
Anyways, thank you so much for watching this conversation that I had with Caleb Hoover, who is, let's just write down in the comments, we love the Lumix Dad. I just feel like he deserves like the Lumix Dad title for YouTube. He's such a legend and he's been here for a while talking all things Lumix. So thank you again, Caleb, for joining me on my channel. And if you guys want to see a couple other cool episodes, here they are right there. And until next week, guys, peace.